see our videos. We're doing videos now of our seminars, and if you ever want to go back and have a look at it, you can actually see it on our website. So the whole program can actually be replicated for other people who don't turn up. So anyway, we'll start off tonight. Basic story today is we're looking at two aspects of your retirement. One is to look at what you would normally do at the start of your retirement, that is going around Australia and looking at the countryside. So I thought I'd come up with three options there. Looking at doing the caravan option, looking at buying a small car and going around Australia, or doing the fly drive option. So for these three options, we're really looking at seeing which is going to be the most economic over 5 years, and we're looking at seeing what the costs are involved in all that. The only thing we're not going to take account of is food, because it's sort of a bit harder to put that into the equation. So we'll go through the options today, and we're going the wrong way. Going through the options, and we're sort of looking at as if you started off and said, okay, I've got some money in your investments and superannuation. What if I bought a car to go around Australia, or a caravan and a car to go around Australia, or just did the fly drive? So we're going to look at those economic options and see how each one plays out on the cost structure. So the first thing is we're looking at saying, well, most people go around Australia, they typically will go up to Cairns or Townsville, come around to Northern Territory, then down to Alice Springs and back through to Adelaide. Now, a few of my clients have also done all this trip around here, which is really about 6 months if you really wanted to take it easy. They normally travel way up the coast here, round to Darwin, get down here, and then find that about 5 months of their trip's about here, and then they tear back here to Canberra in the last month. But that's, I've heard a few people get caught halfway through, and they really haven't covered all the distance. But looking at the this distance here, we're looking at about 10,000 k's. And if you're sitting in a car doing 100 kilometres an hour, it'd take about 107 hours to get around. So it's a fair way, and we all know it's a big country, but the key thing is that it gives you an idea of what we're sort of looking at. You know, a typical sort of retiree would like to do that. So we thought, well, why don't we look at that over 5 years, because you wouldn't do it just for 1 year, to get some sort of economic basis for it. So the next thing we said is the three options: the four-wheel drive, the small car, or just fly and drive. So they're the three things we looked at. We typically find that a lot of people buy a caravan, and then they buy a caravan without a toilet and shower, and then they ring me up 6 weeks later and said, oh, we went away for a trip, and we're now going to upgrade our caravan with a toilet and shower. So I thought, well, let's go and have a look at that. This is one of the typical examples of a caravan with a toilet and shower in it. It's got an annex, as you can see. So the basic story is that they've been designed around two people travelling. So they've got your bed here, you've got your kitchen and seating here, toilet and shower at the back. So it allows two people to comfortably go around Australia. That's a 19-foot caravan, and you've got your bed that folds out there. So that's not a huge caravan, but you're looking at a double bogey obviously on it, but it's something that's reasonably large to pull around, but it's not too big. So to give you a quick idea of what something to look at. Fitted out quite nicely, obviously. Go back there, and fairly spacious, basically. But you're going to be living in them for a while. But the problem then comes that you need a bigger car to pull it. So basically, most people go and say, "Well, I'll have to get a four-wheel drive now." So there's another $60,000 to buy a four-wheel drive. This is we took the three different four-wheel drives to look at. So what we're going to look at is the cost of fuel, cost of rego, camping sites, maintenance, and the depreciation over 5 years, and see what the costs come out. The other option, of course, is just to buy a car and drive around Australia. Now, you don't need a four-wheel drive to drive around Australia, because it's pretty much bitumised all the way around Australia now. You don't need a four-wheel drive to do that. So we said, well, why don't you just buy a small car. A Mazda 3 is the most popular car in Australia these days, as far as what people buy. So if you said, well, okay, you don't need a big car, and look at the fuel, the rego, the maintenance costs, and then stay at a 3-star hotel, let's look at the cost of that. And another option was to just fly there. And we're looking at the major destinations, Cairns, Alice Springs, Mount Isa, and just looking at the cost of that, and then staying again at the 3-star hotel. So we're going to look at that and consider the other things like depreciation, because obviously you've got to factor that in. You're going to lose money on the car, you're going to lose money on the caravan, and a small car as well. Whereas if you fly drive, you don't have that cost at all. There's no outlay of capital. So we're going to look at the lost income from your investments as well, because you put effectively $120,000 into a caravan and a car. You've lost that money for 5 years. You're not getting income off it. So you've got to consider that you've lost income plus the value of the investment, or the value of the car and caravan have actually declined in value. So the first one we looked at was the 4-wheel drive. And we're saying that it's going to cost you a little bit more in fuel because you're pulling a caravan. Typically a caravan's about 2 tonnes, and you've got to have basically a 2.5 tonne car to pull it. So you're carrying roughly 4.5 tonnes around Australia with you. And the net result of that is you're going to cost you a bit more in fuel. So fuel, we've just increased it by about 50% in actual kilometres per 100 litres, litres per 100 kilometres. So we're saying around 13 to 15 litres per 100 kilometres because you're putting a caravan with you. So then we said, well, okay, how much is it going to cost for the caravan? So we're looking up here. These are all 19-foot caravans with toilet and shower. So we're trying to compare like with like. So they've all got that. Resale value, we're estimated to drop about 22% over the 5 years. So basically we're not saying it's going to drop too much. It could drop more. I don't really have much experience about what caravans would be worth after 5 years, but you're obviously going to have wear and tear on the caravan going around Australia. So we're saying they're going to drop in value, and so you've got to factor in a cost of the value drop. So in this case we're saying about $11,000 drop in value over that period of time. Then if you bought a car, a 4-wheel drive, you've got to factor in the cost of that dropping. We haven't dropped it as much as the normal depreciation allowances. We just assumed it's going to drop by about 40%. A normal car over 5 years would normally drop on, these are tax office scales, but they normally would drop to about 20 to 25% of their value. But we're assuming because it's a 4-wheel drive, they're built more robustly, they're a stronger car, so potentially they could last a bit longer, and therefore they wouldn't drop as much. So we've only assumed a fairly conservative 40% drop in value. So on a Pajero, Patrol, they're all pretty much the same price. They're going to drop roughly $37,000 in value there. And so that's money you're not going to get back. Then we said, looking at the cost of going around Australia for 6 weeks, and we looked at the travel up to Moree initially, Rockhampton, Cairns, Mount Isa. So we're doing the circuit. Number of days you'd stay at a caravan park, assuming you're staying there. And they're not that cheap. I mean, $40, $50 generally for a caravan park. I mean, you can stay in a hotel for about, we've got the hotel prices in here as well for a 3-star hotel. So you still got to, pull your caravan there, get it there with fuel and everything. So then we're saying, well, that's the cost of the fuel, that's the cost of the caravan parks, and then we've factored in the depreciation costs in there as well. And the total cost for if you look at a hotel, it's about $5,000, whereas your cost for caravan parks are obviously only about a quarter of that or a third of that. So there's a big difference there. But your total cost for your fuel and everything for your caravan is about $18,000. And then coming back to the cost of the 4-wheel drive and caravan in cost of fuel, so there's a $2,200. That's how we got the figures. So we're saying that obviously in the more remote areas, going to pay a lot more for fuel. We got these off the websites to see what fuel prices would be. So just to give you an idea, that obviously going to pay a bit more, and the cost of about $2,200 for the fuel. We'll go back here. So then we'll look at the fuel cost for the car. Small car, only about half the cost or even less. Because you're not taking a big car, still using the same price for fuel. and the same kilometres obviously. And then we're looking at the hotel stays. So we're looking at the total cost. So to start off with depreciation on the car, the fuel costs, caravan parks, obviously only for the caravan, hotels, obviously for the small car, rego costs, a little bit less, and then your lost investment returns. So what we're saying here, because you don't have your money invested in what investment, you've actually lost $8,000 a year if you're assuming around a 7% return. So the caravan and the car is about $120,000 you've taken out of your investments, whereas in the car you've only taken about 30. So big difference in what you've lost in your income off your investments. Then your maintenance, we're saying that with the four-wheel drive you're going to have a lot more maintenance on the caravan as well, so that doubles up. And then you've got very little maintenance on the car because you've got a smaller car. Total cost, so roughly you're saying that the small car's only going to be half the cost of a caravan. So you're still going to get there the same way, still going to drive the same roads, but you're going to stay in a 3-star hotel and not have to pitch a tent or set up the caravan every day. So then you're looking at then you're looking at that cost over 5 years. So now we're saying that the initial outlay was about $116,000 the caravan car, small car, resale value, depreciation, and then the running costs. So we've got a total cost here of about $84,000 for the 5 years you're doing that, because you're factoring all these things that you probably don't think of initially, depreciation and lost revenue. Small car, you don't lose as much on the in the lost income. So lost income is only so we'll go to the top of it again. So we've got initial outlay 30 grand, lost resale value is 12 on the car, depreciation is less at 18, and then the running costs are about the same. But your investment return, you're not actually spending as much on the car, so you don't lose as much on the investment return. But the net cost is about $25,000. So your costs are much lower on the small car because you haven't lost your income and you're not losing as much on depreciation. That's where you're really losing. So the net benefit for going around in a small car is about $60,000 over 5 years, which is a fair bit of difference. So by travelling in the caravan, you're going to spend roughly around, cost you $60,000 more, roughly about $12,000 a year extra. You've got to be slower, obviously, with a caravan. You can't do the same speeds as a car, and you've got to get your caravan set up every night and then move on. You probably see with some people with caravans, they actually have a bike on the back or a motorbike because they get to the caravan park and they don't want to unhitch it because they want to get some milk down the shop. So they have another thing to get down to the shops, to get food and things. So then that adds more weight and there's more things to carry around. But anyway, the basic story is that we're saying that if you had invested the money at say 7%, it would result in another $6,000 a year in income per year over the 5 years. So that's the big issue. It's really not the fact that it's much cheaper to run a car around. It's just the fact you haven't lost as much of your investment income during the period. So the investment's earnings more than enough to compensate for the hotel costs during the trip, which is about $5,000. So you're getting more money from the investments to cover your costs. So the next thing is, we'll just go there.
Sorry, Russell, that $5,174, over what period of time is that?
That's over the 5 years.
5 years?
Yeah, so, that's each year. Sorry, that bit there is a bit each year, but it accumulates over the period of time. So just go back here, see what's happening. Go back here. What's going on? It's not moving. Outdoors. It's not moving. It's stuck. Okay, so we'll go back over across there. So there's your hotel costs. Go back. There's your hotel costs going the wrong way. So the hotel costs there are $5,000 per year, and then you multiply that out. So your hotel costs are $5,000. if you went to a caravan park at $1,600, so there's a bit of a difference there.
Mm.
But where you're losing it is in the fact that you've got lost this revenue off your investment. So on your investment, you've lost $8,000 a year. So that's where you lost a lot of your returns. And the depreciation costs up here because you're losing so much more on your investments in the caravan and the car. So that's where the $5,000 comes in per year. Fuel costs, so that's just going through it a bit more detail. This is going more into the flights. So you're looking at flying around Australia now, sitting in the comfort of an aircraft, getting there within a day, sitting on the beach, and then you're enjoying yourself. Playing golf, whatever you want to do. So that's the other option, of course. You don't have to spend hours in a car and going from one country town after another. So basically, we're looking at the costs of Canberra to Cairns, Cairns to Darwin, Darwin to Alice Springs, and back again. So about $2,500 in costs. Then if you hired a car every day and did 100 kilometres, this is the cost of the car hire in each city and the cost for the fuel, and then your hotel stay. So that's about $5,800 if you're looking at a fly drive option per year. So 5,800, yeah, that's the total cost there. Then if you look at the comparison of the four-wheel drive and the flights, you then start to get a big difference over 5 years. So you've got your loss of resale value on the caravan and the car, depreciation, running costs, return on your capital, you've lost the capital there. So the net cost is about 85,000, whereas if you fly and drive, your ongoing costs, your ongoing costs about 55,000, but you're getting $40,000 a year in returns on your investment over that period because you haven't had to haven't taken any money out of your capital investment. So you got $40,000 investment return. So you only lost really $15,000 when you come down after the 5-year period. So the net benefit is about $70,000 by just flying and driving. But some people might not like that, Some people like caravanning. They pull up in a caravan park, talk to the guy next door, tell some stories, whatever, 3 o'clock in the morning, and tell stories. So some people love that, but you've got to factor in this cost structure. It's going to be a big difference. So the main thing is that you've lost your capital and you've got more depreciation on the funds. The other thing is that your investment earnings, if you just did the fly drive, the investment earnings can cover 72% of the costs of your flying and hiring a car every year. So you covered a lot of your costs by just having your money invested. And you still got your capital. So this is the four-wheel drive. This is accumulated cost for 6 weeks for 5 years again for the four-wheel drive and caravan. So that's just going through all the figures again to get you the $84,000 in costs. And this is for the small car and the hotel. There's your cost there. Obviously, it's a lot less cost overall, but you've lost because you lost less. There's less investment losses, and you haven't got as much depreciation. They're the two big ones. And then for flying, this is your cost for flying, $15,000 over 5 years. So you've got your, go back again. So $15,000 over 5 years, and you've got your hotels are there, your flying, fuel, hire cars, and your lost investment returns. So over 5 years, you would be better off just to fly and drive, and that would be $3,000 per year cheaper than the small car and $5,000 a year in the caravan. So that's pretty good. The other one is that, as I said, the only benefit of one of the benefits of fly drive is you get there quickly. You don't have to spend time driving through the countryside on outback roads, and you can relax and once you get there. The main disadvantage is you don't meet other people. As I said, a lot of people like caravan because they meet other people, share accounts of the stories of what they've seen and what they haven't seen. and I haven't taken account of the cost of food in this. So, okay, technically, if you're staying in a caravan every day, you could cook your own food and be a bit cheaper. But of course, when you get in these remote places, food's fairly expensive anyway. So it might be 6 to 1, half a dozen, another. So the small cars, 69% more expensive than the fly drive when you look at it, and the caravan is 4.6 times more expensive. So it's a huge difference in costs. So that sort of gives you a bit of an idea of looking at some of these decisions you make, people when make a decision about these sort of things at the start of their retirement, and then it may have an impact at the end of retirement. Because if you used up a lot more cash and capital at the start of retirement doing this travelling, you may not have enough money to get to an aged care home. If you want to go there. So I thought I'd just combine these two concepts, one at the start of the retirement, the other at the end of the retirement. Because at the end of the day, we've got 20, 30 years to spread your money out, and we want to get you there in the best comfort we can. So I thought I'd just bring this graph in first. This came out of the intergenerational report because it really starts to bring home some of the costs that the governments are facing in aged care. Where the taxation comes from is people who work in the workforce primarily, and they're in the 20 to say 55-year bracket. But of course, most people in retirement are not paying much tax at all, because most of you have got ComSuper pensions where you pay a bit of tax, but most of the other have got allocated pensions where you pay no tax from age 60. So you can see here, age 60, the tax revenues drop away. But of course, the costs for government go up. Aged care is one of them. That's that bit there primarily. But the age pension cost is where the money's going out. And we're going to talk about the aged care one, but what we're going to see is that's the figures in 2009 and 10, but those figures keep going up at a much bigger rate than inflation. So we've got to factor in that the rules will probably change on the cost structures, and the rules will probably mean that some people may miss out on living in comfort in the aged care system. So what we sort of look at was the government came up with some new rules in 2012 to say that they announced a reform package to give some more flexibility in the system, and to cover the fact that a lot more people are going into care. So what they're trying to do is push home care packages, because most people want to stay in the home, and the second thing is it's cheaper for the government and it's cheaper for you as well usually. So that's going to be really expanded. The second thing is they're looking to increase the aged care places as well, but not at the same rate as the home care. And they're also giving you an increased range of options to pay for it. There was fairly inflexible ways of paying for it in the past, but you'll see that there's a lot of ways you can pay for aged care. So about 13% of people over 70 live in aged care, and about a third of them are men, and the other about half are women who go into permanent residential care at some point in their lives. But the good news, of course, is that most people go in around the age of 82. So it's really in the last few years of your retirement that you can expect to go there. And 70% of people living in residential care receive the high care. So most people are sort of holding off going into aged care, and it's really at the when it's very difficult to look after yourself. A lot of them are female, obviously, because they live longer, and the average accommodation charge, this is going back a few years, but it was $25 a day. I think it's now $37 a day. So just to give an idea of how that's going up. $25 a day is only about $9,000. So it does sound, I think, expensive, but it's not that expensive relative to the other costs. So accommodation bonds in 2010-11, this is your, for accommodation, cover that, around $250,000. That's where the big costs are going up. We're noticing that a lot of the retirement homes have actually increased their accommodation bonds. Obviously, most people, they're fairly full, a lot of these retirement homes. There are a lot of new ones being built, but they are pretty much full occupancy in those sort of cases. So looking at some figures, in 2014, about 178,000 people in permanent respite care, and about 60,000 in the home care packages, and that's obviously the one that they're going to try and push up. And transition care, I'm not sure exactly what that means, but basically I think they're moving from home care to residential care. So you can see a big difference here between the number of people who received permanent care and number of people in any type of care. So this is sort of saying that there obviously might have been a lot of people who took some care for a bit and then went back into the home. So there's nearly about 75,000 people who may have gone in for a bit of short-term care and then gone back into the homes after that. Home care packages, that's obviously the number of people going through, but the number of people permanently on those, around 60,000. So that's all good. So number of people projected to go into aged care is obviously going to rise fairly quickly over the next 30, 40 years. So they're projecting that out to 2054, but even the next few years it's going to rise fairly quickly. So they're saying potentially the number of older Australians, it's around 3.5 million now, who are over 65, and that'll double in the next 20 years to 6 million. So a lot of people potentially could go into care. The other big increase is people going into their 80s and 90s in Australia. There's a lot more people getting into that group coming through. There's a lot of more octogenarians and people in their 90s and 100s. So this is just showing the number of people over 65 who are in that category. So permanent residents, the general age group is about 84, home care packages 82, and transition care is 80. So you can see there's a transition there. Once people hit 80, they're sort of moving into the care packages, and most of them, about 2/3 are female. Number of people subsidised care places, so 160,000 now up to 173, that's in 4 years. So it's going up quite quickly, and home care packages up 25%. So obviously they're pushing that into home care, but obviously eventually get into the aged care. And total residential people total people in residential home care is about 236, and so forth. So, well, you know, out of a population of 23 million, you're looking at about 1% of the population either in either of this sort of care. So it's not a huge amount, but it's costly. That's the problem for the government. And this is where the costs are coming in. So 2014-15, $10.5 billion of government money going into residential care, rising in the next 5 years or 4 years by 19%. Home care, that's where the big emphasis is, but it's going up 42%. So the government's got to foot this bill, and if their revenues are not going up, which we know about, wages are not going up, so therefore the government's not getting as much through PAYG taxation, but they've got these costs going up at a rapid rate. That's basically the story there. So you're looking at around, about 15 billion in 2014 going to 17 billion, up 15% within 4 years. Then we've got average, this is the interesting one, the accommodation bond. So this is the lump sum you've got to get into to pay for the accommodation, not the daily care fee. So these fees have been going up fairly rapidly. Extra care fees, these are if you want services on top, like a newspaper, a cup of tea, that sort of stuff. They're going up quite expensively in the next few years, or last few years. And there's not a great deal of difference between whether it's owned by a non-profit or profit organisations. Obviously the profit organisations are increasing fees a little bit quicker, but even the state and local government fees are going up. So the costs are going up, and obviously someone's got to pay for it. But the main reason for people going into retirement homes is dementia. That's the big thing. That's causing a lot of younger patients coming in as well as older patients. In fact, the next door neighbour she was a dementia nurse, and she had dementia, and she went down very, very quickly within a few months, and she was in the dementia ward herself. So, and then chronic conditions, obviously, major illnesses can put you into a retirement home. you can't go back to your own home, so it's a major change there. And then if you, major falls is the other one. So that's the sort of thing that can come out of left field for a lot of people. So how do you find a suitable place? So one of the things that the biggest change, you might not be able to read this, but basically now you can go and search the website for the cost of accommodation and what you get. So that's a big change, because in the past you're a little bit at a disadvantage. If you had to get someone into a retirement home and they were coming out of hospital tomorrow and you've got to get them in basically something today, you didn't know what the costs were. You didn't know what the options were. So what all the retirement homes now, or aged care homes, have got to do is actually put that on a website, under My Aged Care website, and we'll show you some examples of that in a minute. They've got to publish the cost of the lump sum accommodation deposit. We could call it a refundable accommodation deposit. These days you're getting 100% of that back when you leave, but in the past they used to use up to about 17,000, 18,000 over 5 years of your deposit bond. You now get 100% back, and there's now a limit on how much they can charge you. They can charge you up to 550,000 for a accommodation bond. Now you saw previously figures were around 250,000 in the average cost. Well, now a lot of places have moved up to the 450, 500 mark, because they can't take money out of your deposit bond. They've got to charge more up front. And that's what's happening there, is that people are, that the retirement aged care homes are actually charging a lot more in the accommodation deposit bond. But don't panic, there's ways of financing that if you don't have the money readily. And one of the ways you can finance it is you can, instead of paying for the deposit bond, you pay instead 6.5% interest on what you don't have. So if you don't have 550,000, you've only got 400,000, you can cover the 150,000 by an interest charge. And that interest charge, if you don't have the money in cash, you can actually take it out of the deposit bond. So that's a bit more flexibility in the system. And they can't charge more than the advertised price. So in the past, they often were saying, they knew how much your assets and incomes were through, because they could get that information from Centrelink if you've got an age pension. They could then sort of price it to the person's ability to pay. Now they've got their price, and you can say, I want that or that or that, and they're not getting that leverage on you. So that's a good thing. So there's some major reform changes. So to get into an aged care facility, you're filling out one of these Centrelink forms. A lot of people are already getting Centrelink before they go in, so a lot of this information is already held by Centrelink, so there's no big deal there. So what they're now doing is breaking people up into 3 categories before they go in, depending on your assets and your income. Obviously, a low means clients, they don't pay any deposit bond at all. Moderate means most people will either be moderate or high in most cases. So you can get classified on your capacity to cover your costs, and then you get charged accordingly from there. So how do they calculate that? Well, they use either 17% of your assets, less $46,000, to get you into each category. So going back, so you've got these categories where you cannot be, basically a moderate means person can have no more than $19,000 worth of assessable income on 316,000. So I won't go into too much detail there, but basically they're working out categories for you. The first category is working on assets, and then there's another or income. So a person who's got less than $25,000 income, assessable income, or 50% of an income on $24,000 for a couple. So basically these things are just to get you into the categories. So I won't go into too much detail there, it's a complicated formula, but basically just saying if you fall down into the assessment of $19,000 on this assessment, then you will be in the moderate means. So $19,000 or less. Accommodation payments assessment of assets. Now, the main thing is they don't assess your own home unless you're renting it out, basically. And even if it's vacant, they'll only assess it at $157,000. So most houses are much more than that. So that's only going to go in the worst case scenario where there's nobody in it and you're renting it, is going to be assessed at $157,000. If you've got a spouse there or a protected person, they call it, that's not assessed. So it covers a situation where one person goes to retirement home and the other person's still living at home. They're not going to count the house in the equation. So the basic story is looking at accommodation payments. Now this is the minimum supplement you're getting from the government. Minimum pension supplement is $894. Energy supplement is $366 per year. These are excluded from the incomes assessment. Any DVA pensions or rent from the home is excluded as well. So these are sort of excluded just in your assessment on income. So just to give you an example, we've got an example of Graham here. He's single, got a term deposit worth $220,000. Wants to move into a place worth an accommodation. This is called a RAD, or refundable accommodation deposit, of $330. So $330 doesn't have enough money. How's he going to cover it? So he falls into the category that his assessment is $30,000, rather, which is above the 19th, so it becomes a high means assessment. So then they say, well, okay, the facility can't leave him with less than $46,000, so he doesn't have enough money to cover the $330. So what he can do is he can cover that difference with a 6.5% interest payment each year. So that's $20,000 per annum, or accommodation of the deposit bond and a daily accommodation payment. So what you're doing is you're doing a mix and match here. So you could pay $150,000 in one case as a refundable accommodation deposit, leaving himself with $180,000, and the outstanding 6.5, he then has to pay interest on the $6,500, sorry, on the $180,000 at 6.15%, so there's $11,000 there in cost, or you can just have the $11,000 deducted from the $150,000. So a couple of different combinations there. So you don't have to have your $330,000 to cover the deposit bond. So that's probably the biggest issue for people, because when you start to look at the accommodation deposit bonds, they're mostly $450,000 to $550,000. Another example is where they've got a home. This is a couple. They have $120,000 cash, $20,000 contents, full age pensioners. They're under the income threshold, so they're in a low category. So they're on a moderate means, and so in their case they'd have to do either what's this? They've got a assessable assets here. That's just assessable assets. So the contribution there would be either daily accommodation, contribution of $4,000 an annum, or a lump sum, or a bit of both. So they're in the low category in this case. So what's this case? So what if they both go to aged care? So now they've still got the $120,000 cash, $20,000 contents, full age pensioners. So what would happen then? They're assessed on the $227,000 each, which makes them a high means and subject to advertised rates, because now they're counting in the house in the equation, the $157,000 in the house value. So John has got both assessed at $227,000. However, he can't be classified as a high means. Can't follow the reason for that, but anyway. But basically what they're saying is that they'll have to then have, they're assessed at either $19,000 as a daily accommodation contribution, or a refundable lump sum of $316, or they can do a bit of both. Now this is sort of the graphic illustrations of where you get low means people have got less than $46,000 and less than the $19,000 worth of assessable income. Most people fall in the moderate, and then there's some people falling in the high income where their assets are over $157,000. and they've got an income of over 63,000. That's when you start to fall into the high means. So most people won't fall into high means, most will be in the moderate, and they'll be paying some accommodation bond and say a part accommodation bond and say some daily care fee. So here's the examples. With the retirement homes, you're not getting a big place, so you're looking at about 4 metres by 4 metres in space, so it's a room. This gives you an example of how many rooms the Baptist Care's got. This is a summary of it, but there's a lot more information on the websites. Maximum daily payments is $109 a day, so, or you can pay $650,000. Now, you can see that's above the $550,000 limit. If it's over $550,000, they have to get a special government approval for the listing it at $650,000. So what that's saying is that they can't just put any price on it. They've got to go to the government and say, yes, it's got special facilities. I don't know what it's got, maybe, I don't know, sunroom or something in there. But basically, they can't go as $550,000 unless they get exemption. So that must be a pretty high renovated or whatever.
It was just been opened.
Is it? Oh, okay, that might be the reason. Okay, there you go. This one's $550. Obviously, this is just a Southern Cross. I'm not sure where that is. Anyway, single room and an ensuite, 18 squares, and a $92 daily payment for that. And the one at Jindalee, you're looking at $400,000. So you can see a bit of a range there. There's not much difference in size, so there must be some differences in facilities. So obviously this one's got the ensuite. This probably has as well. It's just not going to. That's all described in the category 1. So basically, sorry, that you can actually in the Jarrah one, you can actually have an extra service fee, and that's for a cup of tea, things like papers and whatever. You can have that added into the price. This is another one, the Baptist Care again. This one's only $550 daily payments, and then this another one, Jindalee, $550. So you can see that the cost is the same if the deposit's the same. A lot more rooms available in the Baptist Care one, obviously because it's a new, and only 15 in Jindalee. So the ongoing cost is you've got your daily care fee, your means tested care fee, and your extra services. So now we're talking about the care fee itself rather than the accommodation fee. So you've got to factor that in. So your daily care fee is set at 85% of the age pension, so that's $47 a day. So that will go up automatically, so that leaves only 15% of your age pension if you're on a full age pension. All residents have to pay that fee. And then there's a mean tested fee on top of that. So if you've got a good higher income, you're going to have to pay an extra fee. But the fee is capped over a lifetime of $61,000. So that means that you don't have to be forking out for the rest of your life. But remember that the average person only stays in aged care for 80 months on average. So a lot of people are not paying their $61,000 because they're not staying there that long. Which is good. Well, I'm not sure it's good or bad, but anyway, depending on the circumstance. So the additional fees you can pay for extra services. There's no formula for that, so they can charge what they like basically, but you've got the option of not having to buy them either, buy those services. So how do they work out your means test for your daily care fee? Again, it's assessed on these rules about $19,000 income above and below. So if your income's greater than $90,000, the excess is means tested. I won't go through how they work the assessment out, it's a bit complicated, but basically more assets you've got, the more they assess you on your fees. So you've got your refundable accommodation deposit and the ongoing care fee. So that's your assessment of refundable accommodation deposit. At the time the resident may be paying the fees. So basically you're assessed on the assets and incomes on that. Former home, as I said, if you're not living in it and you're renting it out, it gets assessed at $157,000. and your rental income is exempt on the assets test, incomes test.
What's that mean if you rent out your house?
Yeah, so if you both parties or one party's gone into the retirement home, you don't sell your house. You're not forced into selling a house because you